That's right. Welcome in. Welcome back, Drunk Vigo. Hey, buddy, what's up? So, welcome in to Always Irish Live. This is a call-in chat show, a put your opinion in the comment section. Give me a call. I don't care. Whatever you guys want to do, we'll do. This one is an open forum. There's a lot of topics. We could go a lot of different ways. Totally up to you guys. Whatever we want to talk about is whatever you guys want to talk about. It's been a while since we did it. You listen to me rant and rave all the time. I want to know what you guys are thinking about a wide array of topics. We could do it in the chat. I'll set up the phone line. If anybody wants to call in, we could do that as well. Here are a few topics that are on my mind that I would like to throw out to you guys. Let me know what you think. Here's what I'm thinking about. Spring ball. What do you like? What are you worried about? It's hard to tell because you just hear and you see these little clips, but you don't know if you're getting the full picture. It's that typical, if the offense is doing good in practice, does that mean that the defense is bad? If the defense is doing good, is the offense bad? That whole battle that you go, Roy boy, we're going to get to that. Roy boy, we need Dante Moore on the list, and we have some stuff we have to talk about that. We got a lot to get into that involves that exact topic. So spring ball, what do you guys like? What are you worried about? Recruiting. Dante Moore. More is never less when it comes to this fan base, okay? Now, you got Vizina ready to commit, I believe, tomorrow. And what is that, a Clemson situation? Which then boxes Notre Dame and the Dante Moore, right? If it was between those two and Notre Dame's holding out for Dante Moore, Vizina goes somewhere else. Notre Dame boxed itself in, so you better know what you're doing. That's a dangerous game. You got to make sure you're not holding an empty bag at the end of it. Braylon James, supposed to be maybe, Notre Dame guy, was supposed to be last week. I believe CBS pushed his commitment down the road another week. So we're going to have to wait for that. I want to know if any of you guys have an opinion on Notre Dame scheduling in FCS. Do you care about that? Do you not care about that? Do you feel like it's the same as scheduling UMass or anybody else that's like a smaller level school, or does it actually bother you? And another topic that popped up, Brian Kelly running his mouth. He's getting chirpy. He's getting chirpy down there in the swampland, and he had a lot to say, taking some shots at Notre Dame structurally. I want players that want to be great, so I left Notre Dame. It's hard to recruit. I can't believe Brian Kelly was saying, it's unbelievable. You recruited Notre Dame and they expect you to be on a plane flying around talking to guys. I didn't want to do that. That never changed in the entirety of Brian Kelly being at Notre Dame. That's always been how you have to recruit at Notre Dame. There's no other way to do it. So that's not something that changed on Brian Kelly, and now he's acting like it was a shock that he learned that. And I just find that slightly, if not majorly, bizarre. I hate to say it. I mean, I got to tell you. So those are the four main topics I have in my mind, and I'm open to you guys. Fire up the phone lines, put it in the chat. We'll talk about it. Whatever we're gonna do here. It's your time, your dime. Oh, one update as well. I will be going to the Blue and Gold game. I'm going to be with the Irish Players Club group that day. So if anybody's going there, it's going to be much easier to meet up with people for Blue and Gold than it was when I went for USC and my phone wouldn't get reception. I get from Indiana back to Illinois and have 30 text messages I did not receive in Indiana. So I don't know what's with their signals getting jammed or whatever. But it's going to be much easier for me to meet up with people at Blue and Gold. So if you're a part of the Irish Players Club, I'm going to see you at that event. And if you're not, let me know anyways, and we'll still meet up. Okay. So that being said, let's get in the chat a little bit. Oh, let's see here. Hearing the offense is shredding the defense in practice. Demetrius says that. Now, here's the thing. Here's what I always wonder about that. We already know football's set up for the offenses to succeed, right? In college and the pros, the way the rules are, everything else. It's all made for the offense to succeed. Then you're running these offensive plays. I feel like the offense is always probably going to have an advantage just by the way it's set up. They don't want a lot of hard contact. So I always just wonder about that dynamic. That being said, I think this Notre Dame offensive line is going to start the year way better than where we finished the year last year. That's going to open up a lot of things early for this offense, and that's a big deal. It's a huge deal when you have a young quarterback, especially. So I think that's going to be a big deal, and I love it. Drunk Vigo asking, how about the Masters? Scotty Scheffler's just a great player. I have a cousin who played youth golf with Scotty Scheffler and Will Zalatoris, and they all grew up playing in a junior circuit for those really elite players. They said both of those guys, nicest guys in the world, great families, humble kids. Glad to see Scotty win. He's a baller. He's a baller and a mauler for sure. So I did like seeing that. We need Dante Moore, says Roy. Here's the thing, you guys. Somebody got to help me with this in this chat. Somebody help me. Or I don't want to make the Dante Moore recruitment a bigger deal than it already is, but at the same time, it's a huge damn deal. So I don't get to have it both ways. I don't want to put the pressure on making this such a make or break pivotal thing, but at the same time, it's such a fulcrum point in getting him would be such affirmation, I guess is the word I'm looking for, affirmation of why Marcus Freeman is here. That personality, that ability to be able to recruit, connect with these guys in that way. This would just be the perfect start for the Marcus Freeman tenure to land a guy like this. And I got something special coming up for you guys with Dante Moore. I have a guy who breaks down film and analyzes from a mechanical level, looking at the film, breaking down guys' strengths, weaknesses from high school, where they need to get better, all that kind of stuff. He's going to be joining my program shortly to do a full-scale breakdown about the mechanics of Dante Moore, what he's great at physically, what he still needs to mature at, his inclination as a leader, as a guy who just kind of has the it factor. We're going to cover a lot of ground. So stay tuned for that. That'll be coming out soon. We all know he's good, but I want to have a guy on who breaks down film, show me and tell me exactly what he sees compared to a lot of these other players. Carnell Tate. What's the new news on Carnell Tate? Anybody know? I mean, I know we're all just kind of figuring it was going to be hard to pull him away from the wide receiver factory that is the Ohio State University. Now, again, Dante Moore keeps coming back in the loop here. Think about this. If Dante Moore commits in a bunch more months, wouldn't it be more advantageous for us if he really liked Notre Dame and did it soon? So then he's on board and all these other good elite wide receivers and everybody sees that Notre Dame already has this great guy in the fold. We want to go play with him. My fear is the longer that we get down the road and this isn't done, other people get in the guy's ear. Who knows what can happen? You go on these visits. Other people start talking. That's all kind of dangerous. Okay, to me, the longer this goes on, you could still end up with him if it strings out down the road. But who knows? You might lose some other guys that didn't see him on board, and so they didn't jump on board or made other plans or whatever. So I think there's just a lot to consider there. And I know Notre Dame people that I've talked to feel very, very confident about the Dante Moore recruitment. And that's fine. And I do too. I don't have any information saying otherwise. But until it's done, it isn't done. And I'm going to be nervous. So the sooner the better, not only so we can stop worrying about Dante Moore's commitment, but so that we could transition into building on top of it. And so that's where I think the timing on this matters. You throw in the fact that I don't think any Notre Dame people are expecting Vezina to pick Notre Dame tomorrow, because it seems like everybody thinks Notre Dame's kind of waiting on Dante Moore, and Vezina knows that. So I just don't want to get boxed in here where you end up holding an empty bag at the end of this. And then all the stories will be, this is what happens. Marcus Freeman, first-time coach, got burned, fell for this, all that stuff. I don't want to go there. I want to avoid all of it, okay? Because that's what it would turn into, and I want to avoid it. They've done a great job with this recruitment. Finish it off, build on it, okay? But the longer it goes, a guy like me is going to get nervous. You could say Notre Dame's the leader all you want, but then he visits this place, visits that place. Somebody's in his ear. The longer it goes, the more nervous John's going to get. That's just the way it is. Okay, that's just the way it is. Brian hopes Michigan goes back to sucking. Here's the issue with that. One is, to me, in 2023, it looks like they're off to a pretty slow recruiting start, momentum-wise. And I've seen some of their people complaining about that. I also think that may be a byproduct of your coach trying to leave. You don't get to just come back after what he did and act like nothing ever happened. You don't get to do that. There are tangential consequences for your actions. And I think they're starting to experience some of that in recruiting. All right? Everybody knows. Families, recruits, players, families, all of that. They all know that this guy tried to leave. You don't get to just hop back and act like everything's all good. Okay? No. So I think maybe what you're seeing with them are the repercussions of Jimmy's actions. All right? And I love to see it. Love to see it. And the cherry on top is taking Dante Moore out of there. So that's what I need to see. As for on the field, take a look at Michigan's 2023 upcoming schedule. Not even 23. That's recruiting. Take a look at their schedule. It's going to be hard for them to go back to sucking because they play almost nobody. It's a joke. It's a joke. Okay? Their schedule, Google it. Look it up. It's a joke. All right? So good luck for them sucking. They could not be that good and win 9, 10, 11 games in this conference the way their schedule is. So who knows? Somebody fill me in on Carnell Tate. Tell me what you're hearing. Tell me what you're reading. Braylon James, what's the deal with that? Supposed to be a done deal, Notre Dame, I heard. Thought it was going to be last weekend. He was supposed to announce on CBS, I believe. Pushed it back a week. Hopefully Notre Dame gets good news on that front. And it's at a position of dire need for ballers. That's what it would be. I'd love to see. Notre Dame 2164. He knows Dante Moore's a headstrong kid that wants to make the right decision. But if he wants to be a recruiter for the class, you can't wait till the end of the summer. That's kind of what I'm saying. And I think that's some of the box that Marcus Freeman, Tommy Rees, I feel like they're in a little bit of a trick bag here because they want to be patient with the kid. They understand he wants to make his visits. They want to be respectful to him, hearing everything everybody's got to offer, whatever, at their schools. But the timing matters here. The timing matters. And I think the writing's on the wall here if Vezina ends up committing to Clemson and he kind of knew that Dante Moore's Notre Dame's first choice and they're waiting him out and he doesn't want to wait, so he's doing this. The timing of it all matters. The sooner, the better, because you could cross that big worry off your list. You got your quarterback, and then it turns into recruiting. Let's play with this kid. Let's play with this guy. He's elite. I want to play with him. Let's go. All those elite kids play at all these all-star camps with all the other elite kids. They all know each other. They grew up together on all these 7-on-7 camps and everything else. They want to play together. Get Dante Moore in the house, and then you recruit and build on that. So listen, it's a tough spot for Marcus Freeman and the staff to be in. You want to be patient, but you can't be too patient. And at some point, you might have to make that call. Hey, you know you're our number one guy. I need you to make this official because we need to know what we're doing here. So that ship might have already sailed if Fazina was number 2 and you told him we're waiting on more and he commits somewhere else. So we are rowing down this river. It just needs to work out. Everything's piecing together. It just needs to work out, and sooner better than later. For my hairline, stress, blood pressure, and the rest of that recruiting class, which, by the way, is ranked number 1 in the country currently, and that's a beautiful thing to see. Every single guy on it, 4-star, 5-star. Love it. Let's build it. You get Dante Moore, it's a rocket ship. Let's go. Oh, let's see. Riker hopes BK loses bad. I'm going to tell you what, when I Googled that Michigan schedule and laughed at how easy it was, I also looked at that LSU schedule. That's a tough schedule. Like, you have your couple junior highs in there, but that's a tough schedule, though. I looked at BK's first year. When you get into that SEC, there's not that many gimmies on that schedule. Look it up. I don't remember it all, but I know out of curiosity, I Googled LSU schedule just to see. Woo, doggy. I don't know how it's going to go for Brian this year. It's kind of tough. Kind of tough. Brian Crawdaddy asks, do I still hate Michigan? Am I still breathing, Brian? As long as I'm breathing, that's what it's going to be. And listen, the Dante Moore thing, it's a huge deal, but the fact that there's a Michigan component in this and how mad they're going to be losing an in-state guy to Notre Dame, I'm so excited about the prospect of that I don't even want to talk about it because of how disappointed I'll be if it doesn't happen, okay? But as long as I'm breathing, I'm going to hate Michigan. And even after I'm done breathing, I'll probably put on my tombstone, I hate Michigan. You know what I'll do? I'll put on my tombstone, I'll get an etched picture of that dumb girl that's sitting there, that inbred caveman girl. I always put the gif on Twitter. I'll probably put her on my headstone just so everybody knows. David Solomon brings up Solomon with a solid point, man. Very good point. And this is a part of where I'm going with this. From all indications, Dante Moore, good family, good kid, good head on his shoulders. At the same time, if you're going to be a quarterback of that caliber, you got to have some alpha in you. You got to have some I'm the man in you. You have to. You don't get to that level to be a 5-star guy if you don't have that alpha dog mentality all the time. Those are headstrong kids. Those are kids that like the lights. They like the attention. That is a part of what makes them great. So I won't hold it against them because some of that mentality is what makes those guys great on the field. I can't hold it against them. However, David's saying, you start taking these other visits, all of a sudden these NIL deals start showing up, and the next one's better than the next one, and the next one has this guarantee, and the next one's offering that, and it's already in place and all this. Those are the kind of things that make me nervous. David, you're right on it. And the longer it goes along and the more visits we take, the more that I am concerned something like that comes about, not from Notre Dame, and it starts all those positives about Notre Dame, and it starts shifting the calculus. That's all the kind of stuff that has me nervous. And I'm a nervous guy when it comes to Notre Dame anyways, because I got 37 years of scar tissue, all right? So I'm nervous about it. I will still maintain if Notre Dame doesn't secure this commitment, there's nothing the staff did wrong. There's not. This isn't Brian Kelly where I wonder if he even bothered to call the guy or text him. I don't have that concern with this staff in recruiting. So it isn't going to be an effort reason if we don't get the guy. That being said, the sooner the better. The sooner the better for a bunch of reasons. How about the White Sox? I mean, they should have swept the first series, but I guess I'll take a series win, but they should have swept it, no doubt. And I'm already over the injuries. Season just started, half the team's out with injuries. So frustrating that I'm over it. Billy Pizza, hotter cheerleaders, helps in recruiting. It doesn't hurt. It's never been known to hurt any recruiting effort. I'm not going to deny that. It's always worked. That and money are the two things that have always worked in recruiting, right? If you got enough of both. Yeah, David's talking about it. Tennessee, a guy with a $6 million NIL deal, whatever. But here's the bigger philosophical point with that discussion. The guys going to Notre Dame aren't usually as immediately concerned about that initial upfront NIL money right away. And I think that's where there's some nuance with Notre Dame in this discussion. A lot of the guys that like Notre Dame seriously come from those good families, stable environments. That initial NIL money isn't the biggest deal to these guys like it might be, or as big of a deal to some of the Notre Dame guys as it is some other players in other places. I'm not putting a judgment on that, saying it's right or wrong, good or bad. I'm just saying a lot of the guys Notre Dame goes for, that isn't the biggest thing. It's a factor because it should be a factor. If I was a college athlete and I could get paid, I would want to. Would you want more money or no money for what you're doing if it's possible? But I just don't think it's as big of a deal. Sid Irish, Tate isn't coming to ND. We just need Dante. Well, I mean, a guy could dream, right? Maybe if you get Dante in early enough, things could change on that. Great question by Mr. Adamiola. How many games do you think we'll win this year? I have been thinking of this. Like, literally, the next call-in show I was going to do, I think I was just going to ask everybody what they think the potential record might be. When you look at the schedule, 10-2 with reasonable help should be the low end, right? Here's the tricky thing. Here's the tricky thing about this. Brian Kelly got the program to a point the way Brian Kelly was doing it, where you could count on Notre Dame beating everybody they should beat. Now, it might be ugly, and it was ugly and stressful, and half my hairline fell out. That's why I got this going on. It was stressful, but nobody can deny, even with the frustrations people had with Brian Kelly, or still do maybe, there's no denying he got Notre Dame to the point where they were beating everybody they got to beat and should beat and were expected to beat. Now, my question is, does Marcus Freeman pick that up right where it left off? Or is his learning curve as a coach going to cost you an extra game that maybe Brian Kelly wouldn't have lost this year? But on the flip side, once Freeman figures it all out, combined with the recruiting effort, there's a bigger high-end potential, but it's rougher this year while he figures out how to be a head coach. Talent-wise, 10-2, 9-3 at the absolute worst, I think should be totally reasonable. Assuming relative health, looking at the schedule, Notre Dame can't lose 4 games. I just don't see that with reasonable health and the talent built into this schedule. The problem is Ohio State's a big one week 1, right? Like if you have goals going 10-2, things don't go your way at the horseshoe. That doesn't leave you much leeway for your 10-2 at the end of the year when it's 85 degrees out and you already have a loss. That's where I think this really gets tricky. You find a way to upset Ohio State at home, all bets are off. Then the entire discussion of my entire life has changed at that point. If they go in there and figure that out and somehow beat them, totally different discussion. It changes everything. New world. That's a new world at that point. But assuming relative health, looking at that schedule, 9-3, 10-2 needs to be the bottom. There's not 4 losses on this schedule with relative health. No way. But I think the biggest question here is, does Freeman start off right where Kelly left off, beating everybody we're supposed to beat? That's a big question. Or there are too many moving parts, too many things he has to learn on the fly for that to be realistic. That is one of my big questions entering this year. News with Carnell is that ND closed the gap with Ohio State on his visit. There you go. Maybe you get his pal, Dante Moore, in the house. Maybe that gap closes a little more. You get Braylon James jumping in. You're a good wide receiver. Carnell Tate sees that. He sees more. He sees the rest of that class, and he wants to be a part of it. Anything could happen at that point. You get one of those top quarterbacks, it opens all kinds of ears and eyes and doors. It just does. It just does. 11-1 regular season, A. Sorrentino. If you're saying it's an 11-1 regular season, what do you have then? An opening loss to Ohio State, and then we run the table? I don't know if that's fair or realistic for Marcus Freeman's first year. And again, I said, if we have to take a slight step back this next year to get things situated in a position that sets us up for higher level success when it does get rolling in 2 or 3 years, sign me up. Sign me up. I've already done the Brian Kelly thing where we beat everybody we're supposed to beat and lose to everybody else. We've already done that. Been there, done that. So if I got to be frustrated a little more than usual next year and go through some of those learning and growing pains with Marcus Freeman, I'm willing to do it because I just think the high-end potential on the other side is so great that it's worth it. So that's kind of where I think we're at. So a few people are agreeing here. They could see us running the table with that only loss being to Ohio State. If that happened, the sky is the limit. I don't, that's a bit much for me to personally expect, but especially if that first loss comes week 1. That means you got to be perfect from then on out. That's just a heavy ask. It's a big ask. But when you look at the schedule too, USC, I expect the offense to be much better, but they are not what they're going to be after 2 or 3 or 4 recruiting cycles. Just like Notre Dame's not. Okay, there's not enough time to flip and fill and do what you need to do this quickly. So 11-1 with the loss week 1 and riding it out would be an unbelievable start for Marcus Freeman. If he goes 9-3, I'm not going to have my head on fire. If he goes 9-3 the first year, working things out, trying to figure out the roster, fill those gaps where he needs to, develop a quarterback, keep recruiting at an elite clip, all of that. 11-1 would be an outrageously successful first year, especially if you were able to go 11-1 and then parlay that into a New Year's 6 win. Not just show up, but win. Or if 11-1, everything breaks and you can get in the playoff with it, who knows? But 11-1 might be asking a lot. Maybe you guys disagree. But that big philosophical existential question is, while we gave Brian Kelly a hard time for not winning the biggest of the big games, he started getting to where he beat everybody you got to beat and are expected to beat. Will that continue and not skip a beat now? Big question year 1 for Freeman. Buckeyes, Tate. Yeah, listen, who could blame any good wide receiver for wanting to go play for Ohio State? I just don't. I can't blame anybody for that. Next Tuesday for Braylon James still looks like ND will get the commitment. That is what I understand the situation to be as well. Here's the other thing about that. I got a little something special that I'm going to put out for that if it does go Notre Dame's way. So stay tuned to this channel. If Notre Dame gets Braylon James, I'm going to drop something special for that right when the news drops. Stay tuned. And I hope I get to do it because I got something good planned that you guys will like. Rob asks if I have an early prediction for Ohio State Labor Day weekend. Not yet. I haven't even gotten into all that yet. I could see that going a bunch of different ways, from total depression to total adulation and everything in between. I have not even started breaking that all down yet, emotionally or practically. That could go a bunch of different ways, and it's very intriguing. But I'll be honest, I haven't even sat down and thought about it yet. I've had some nightmares of those wide receivers getting behind us wide open, but I'm not going to lie. I've had some daydream moments of seeing us surprise them in some ways as well. So that's going to be a hell of a week one matchup. Riker says Nick Saban's happy playing Brian Kelly. Yeah, he probably is. He probably is. They're fighting for a lot of the same talent down that way. Dev, man, Penn State fans are worse than Michigan fans. It all must just depend on who you know or what's happened to you in your life. Like, I don't care for Penn State people, but they just don't get to me personally the way Michigan does. Oh, let's see. Yeah, Jackson Arnold, that's another thing similar there to the Vizina situation. So you put your eggs in the Dante Moore basket. It's risky, but it could pay off big for you. Could pay off big for you. You just don't want to be left holding no bag, or a bag empty, rather. Oh, let's see what else we got. People ripping on Brian Kelly. Listen, I'm just telling you, Brian Kelly did a lot of good things in Notre Dame. He rebuilt that program from some dire straits, and I give him a lot of credit for that. He just couldn't get it over the top, mostly because he wasn't willing to change the things within his control that had to be changed to get us over the top. But Brian Kelly did some really good things here. Program was in rough shape when he took over. Coincidentally, it ended up in rough shape again after a few years after he was here, which I have no patience for. You know, he's the one that caused that teardown rebuild to have to be needed after 2016. But he did a lot of really, really good things. And if Marcus Freeman's able to get over the hump at Notre Dame, some people aren't going to like this, but Brian Kelly's going to deserve some level of credit for that. I don't know how much. I'll let you figure it out, how much you want to give him. But make no doubt about it, if Marcus Freeman wins something at a higher level than Brian Kelly did, Brian Kelly's going to deserve some amount of credit for that. We could debate on how much, but he has laid the infrastructure and a solid foundation, a reasonably decent culture, and all of that can now be cultivated and taken to the next level. Oh, JD. JD, thank you for appreciating that. I thought that was my best line from the last video. When I was talking about Notre Dame being hip, and then I said something about the only time I ever heard Notre Dame being hip before is when the old guy behind me broke his, yelling at me to sit down during a big third down play. JD, you're my favorite because I thought that was a good line too, so thank you for appreciating that. Do we believe in Buckner and his experience he has, or do we put all our chips on getting more and what that leads to? Chaz asks. Well, you do both at the same time. They're in different classes. So Buckner's already here. So then now you get this guy and you throw them both out there and say the best guy's going to start the next year. And if that's Dante Moore and he's just physically so developed that he's the guy, he's the guy. So a lot of this is going to have to do with what Tyler Buckner looks like this year. Obviously, that's going to shape your opinion going into this. And of course, we're getting ahead of ourselves. I'm not trying to jinx us. We are getting ahead of ourselves by assuming Dante Moore will be Irish. But if he is, and Buckner has a good year, and then Dante comes in, it's an open competition to me at that point. And then you see where it is. And if Buckner holds that guy off, Buckner will be better for it because he'll be pushed by a superior physical athlete. I don't think there's any doubt to me Dante Moore is a bigger, stronger athlete. than Buckner is. So see how he develops this year. If you get Dante Moore, you say, hey, the best guy's going to play. We're having a competition here. So competition's good, and it raises the play of everybody. And you just have to see where you're at that point. What I feel bad about with Tyler Buckner more than anything else is his develop has been stunted by things that are not his freaking fault. He had the injury. There goes a year. He had COVID. That messed things up. Like, he's got a couple years of development in here that wasn't really able to be natural. And that is not his fault or anybody else's fault, but it's just kind of a reality of where we're at. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic. Oh, what else do we have? A shootout at the Horseshoe? I would hope so. Most people are worried it's going to be a one-way shootout. I'm seeing people already just saying Notre Dame's going to get boat raced and have no chance at all. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that if certain things take place. But I've seen a lot of people predicting that boat race week 1. Can we start a pool on who Kelly's going to blame after the first LSU loss? I don't know. Don't tell the LSU people that. They don't like me. They're all ranting and raving about how awesome Brian Kelly's spring press conferences are and how great he is and how polished. Brian Kelly's wonderful when everything's going right. Everything's beautiful with a politician when they're winning. I tell the LSU people, wait till you guys lose 2 to 3 games in the SEC in a row. Then we'll see how things are going in those press conferences they love. Everything's beautiful now. It's the honeymoon phase. They don't know what they don't like about each other yet. Of course, things are great. Oh, boy. That's a riot. What else do we have here? Technical technician. Why would 9-3 be acceptable? I consider this a travesty. I get it. I cannot argue with that. Technical technician. If you're telling me that's where you're at, I get it. I just think maybe sometimes people are underestimating some of the areas of this program that aren't where they need to be. And sometimes I feel like just because Freeman's here now doesn't mean that all those holes are plugged and all that lack of depth has depth now. We saw that in the bowl game. I'm not blaming Freeman for that loss. There were a lot of reasons for that loss. Marcus Freeman personally wasn't on the top of the list. Okay? So it's like, I've heard this before too. John, 9-3, 10-2. If Brian Kelly went 9-3 and 10-2, you would light the house on fire with yourself in it. Yeah, exactly. I would, because that's Brian Kelly with 12 years of experience doing the same thing, not adapting, not evolving, not changing. This isn't that. This isn't that. So yeah, 9-3, I'm not going to be happy. You got to keep it in double-digit wins. 10-2 at the low end, sure. But I'm just saying with Marcus Freeman, the way he's going to recruit, if he needs 1 year of leeway to lose one dumb game we shouldn't lose, but on the back end of it, we end up with some elite rosters, I'm willing to deal with it. I'm willing to deal with it. I'm not saying I'm going to like it. I'm not going to love 9-3. It's going to seem like a step back. People are going to start questioning Freeman. Nobody can undo 11 years of Brian Kelly in 1 year. I'm sick of people acting like you can. Nobody can undo 11 years of Brian Kelly-ness in about 6 months. Not possible. Jesus couldn't come down off the library and fix all the things that I want to address that Brian Kelly left in this amount of time. It's not possible. It's not possible. The roster alone is going to need Freeman to get a couple cycles in here to fill some holes with some high-end depth, okay? So if I need to give him 1 year of leeway, but I know there's higher-end potential later, I'll deal with it. I don't love it. But I'll deal with it. I see Lee talking about the Clemson spring game. There's a lot of people that weren't impressed with that game, said the offenses look bad. It's a spring game. Who knows what to think? Pigskin Pete was at the game, the Clemson YouTuber. He seems to think people are overreacting about what they saw. I expect their defense to be really good, but on offense, it does look like they're still a little iffy. The other thing is that game's on the back end of our schedule. We got a long way to go before we get there and see what's up with that. 9-3 is not acceptable. I don't like it either. I'm not saying 9-3 is acceptable, but here's what I'm saying. I am not saying 9-3 is acceptable, but what I am saying is Marcus Freeman going 9-3 in year one has to be looked at very differently than Brian Kelly going 9-3 or 10-2 in year 12. Those are not the same thing to me. We're not dealing with apples to apples. So that is where I struggle with this a little bit, with just a flat, what's the record going to be? 9-3 for Marcus Freeman is not the same as 9-3 with Brian Kelly. It's not. So I agree 9-3 isn't where you want to be, but I will not react the same way of a Freeman 9-3 I would as a Kelly 9-3. They're totally different circumstances with the same gold helmet and gold dome. Oh, okay. Two Irish brothers. I'd rather have the Brian Kelly era than the previous 15 years of Davey, Willington, and Weiss. Absolutely. 100%. How could you argue that? I wonder if some people are just too young. And now, there's a lot of people I realize they were 10 when they started following Notre Dame, and they're 20-something now. All they've known is Brian Kelly their whole life. It messes with my brain to realize that I'm old and that these people started following Notre Dame when they're 10 or 11. All they've known in their cognizant mind is Brian Kelly. That being said, compared to Davey, Willingham, and Weiss, there's no doubt. Give me Brian Kelly all day, every day compared to that group. I will say this, though. Davey and Willingham, woof. But I will say this. Charlie Weiss had a couple recruiting classes there that had me going, okay, maybe this guy's onto something when he throws that big ring on the table or whatever from the Patriots and recruits. He could just never get it all to come together. And his arrogance was a problem. I know people say that about Kelly, but Weiss's thing wore on people that way as well. If I'm given all those options, Irish brothers, I don't know which one of the brothers you are. I'm with you. Give me Brian Kelly all day. And I don't know if you were here, but I said, if Marcus Freeman succeeds at any level higher than what Brian Kelly was, that higher than Brian Kelly attained at Notre Dame, Brian Kelly deserves a amount of credit. I will let you decide how much. But if Freeman gets this baby over the hump, Kelly deserves credit. He put the foundation in, got us to a certain level that would allow Freeman to add the finishing touches, his elite recruiting, off to the races. So Brian Kelly's going to deserve credit. A lot of people aren't going to want to give him. Sid Irish, low bar. I'm not saying I'm fine with us going 9-3. I'm just saying year one head coach going 9-3 cannot be looked at the same as year 12. That is my only point. I'm not going to be happy. We're going to do this show. I'm going to have a stroke on the air. We're going to do all that if we go 9-3. But it isn't going to be the same as Brian Kelly going 9-3 in year 12. I just see them as being vastly different. I still think people are underestimating some of the holes on parts of this roster. When you get into the games against teams as good as you, or better, that's where you're going to see that stuff come into play. It isn't going to be week to week and all that. But when it matters the most, you're going to see those areas exposed. Coincidentally, one of them's week one. You're going to find out right away week one. Is that secondary up for the job? Week one. What do you got in Buckner? Week one. There is no Central Mississippi Southern Junior High. Let's see how it goes. We can mess around and still win. Nope. So we're going to have a good idea where this is all at year one. And I hope that makes sense when I'm saying about Freeman. I don't like 9-3, guys. I do not like 9-3, but it isn't going to be the same as a Brian Kelly 9-3 after 12 years. Nope. So I don't know. Keep it in double digits. 10-2 or better. 10-2 or better. We're going to switch it over to the phone lines. We got a 509 caller. What is that? Washington? You're on the air.
Hey, John, this is Joe over at Fighting Irish Baseball. Good to talk to you.
Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. What's on your mind, my friend?
Hey, I really appreciate your show. Really appreciate this forum to get people in a kind of a live feedback conversation. It's really, really great. I really appreciate your last show talking about the Notre Dame historics in quotes, about scheduling an FCS team with Tennessee State. And the question I have for you, and I think the fear is that now we've opened up a box, obviously, that we can't close. And the next question is, well, what's next that makes, fans uncomfortable? I mean, let's face it. People were uncomfortable with the Jumbotron. People were uncomfortable with turf instead of grass. The band being in the stadium, and those are kind of minor things. I think this is a huge, huge step, though, compared to those other steps.
I wonder this as well. And one thing, thank you for listening or watching the last show. Here's one philosophical thing that entered my brain that I did not think of ahead of time to bring up in that episode. And the question was, is this just a one-time thing because of the unique opportunity relationship between Eddie George and Marcus Freeman and the HBCU? And if we're going to do this, we are at least going to make it something with some cultural impact, or it isn't just, some lame game with no storylines. But that's a question I want to know the answer to. Is this a one-time thing because of the unique dynamic, or is this the entryway to a scheduling model that we should get more used to? And that is a question that I honestly don't know. But when I saw all this first start, my first thought was, this is a conference scheduling move. Like, that's what they all do. And it's the first thing that went into my mind. I could be overplaying this. What do you think? It could just be a bigger deal to me than it should that we haven't played in FCS. Maybe that's the case. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just as people were freaking out about Jumbotrons and things of that nature, and then now that you go to the stadium, it's like kind of hard to honestly think about the stadium without it. I would personally rather they just expose touchdown Jesus in the north end zone instead, so you could see that from the end zone. But that's another piece of architecture altogether. But the FCS thing, I kind of think like in a couple of years we'll even forget that we all had this conversation. In all honesty, and yes, it's historic, and I'm clearly there's some sort of PR, angle that Notre Dame is doing it with it being Tennessee State versus, pick your other favorite FCS school. So I do think Notre Dame is playing that card per se within the current culture of things. Notre Dame tends to do things that are bold and historic, and if they can say, hey, our first FCS team is this historical black college, fine. I really don't care. I mean, I haven't looked at Tennessee State's, ranking on Sagarin or their record the last few years, but is that any different from us playing UMass in 2015?
Right.
Or playing Bowling Green and New Mexico State in 2019, where we killed both teams. But then the two good teams we played, Michigan and Georgia, on the road, we lost, and there it is, right? So and furthermore, the strength of schedule argument. So I am a huge fan of strength of schedule. Unfortunately, historically, the playoff committee, does not. They'll pay attention to it. Like, we can't be Marshall with 120th ranked schedule, but let's face it, Florida State, the year they won the title, they did not have a good strength of schedule in 2013. So if you go back historically, like, Van Grant, that was the BCS era, right? The last year of the BCS, and they were undefeated. They had a Heisman Trophy winner, and their stats were quite frankly amazing, but they were embarrassing teams.
Yeah,
so I really think that there is not a huge drawback to Notre Dame. And furthermore, on my show, I did an analysis. I think it was last year, the week we played South Florida, because that was kind of our grab bag gimme game, right, against a junior college, so to speak. And I'm conveniently forgetting about the 2011 game. But anyway,
good.
That is why I do not have guests over at my home anymore. We had guests to kick off the season, and I was irate, and so we just don't do that.
Not only irate, but it took 10 hours for it to end. That was the worst part. It was the worst part.
I mean,
10 hours. If I'm going to bleed out and die, make it fast.
You were able to get a second buzz on. But
yeah, exactly.
That was just painful and long and drawn out.
Oh, that was the worst. Like, for a lot of reasons, that was uniquely miserable. Miserable.
So bad. But quick point I wanted to make was, you look at, SEC teams or, Florida State in 2013, any of these teams in the last 10 years who have won the title, even Clemson, you could argue, they all have either an FCS team, and I would say one of these weaker, conference games, against, a team like a Tennessee.
Okay, now let me ask you this, though. Let me push back on this. And from a conference, let's say I'm a fan of a team that's in a conference full-time. Here's what I'm going to say to that is, yeah, they scheduled that, but then they had the extra 13th game in their championship. And so Clemson would play one of those teams, but then they would theoretically beat a decent team in the conference championship game and then kind of make up the slack of that game. We don't have that benefit because there's no extra game. So how
You're
like
right. And it's kind of a conundrum because it's like, well, and I think you should have a few quote unquote easier games just because it gets people more reps, it builds confidence, you can kind of explore your playbook a little more. Maybe your starters aren't as banged up, the week after playing Navy or something, right? So there's benefit to that to an extent of resting your players and kind of the greater good of your program through the season. But my issue with it as a fan is it makes for garbage football. Watching Illinois get drubbed by Ohio State is boring. No one likes watching that. Assuming that Notre Dame drubs Tennessee State in 2024, quite frankly, that's kind of boring.
Yeah, I get that.
I mean, it's fun. It's fun to watch, us run up and down the field, and tickets tend to be cheaper. So,
but see, okay, let me play devil's advocate on that angle of this as well. If you look, we went over the way some of these other teams schedule, that works for them. There's a science to building a college football schedule. Like there's a rhythm to it. Some people are better at it than others. There's a formula. The question would be, you look at how those teams are scheduling and if they have their conference, what they're doing in the non-conference, whatever. And then you look at Notre Dame. Do you want Notre Dame to stack 10 really good teams in a year? And like competitively, what are the odds Notre Dame's going to be able to survive that enough compared to the way some of the other schedules are built? Like, is there a balance there? You can't have it be murderer's row. There's a lot of people that don't even agree with scheduling Ohio State week 1 just because of what that could do to you if it doesn't go well right out of the gate. So I think there's a big, if you're going to remain independent, I think there is a big pendulum there, and you got to find a balance to where it's interesting enough that people care about the games, but it isn't murderer's row with an independent schedule where we have little to no chance. Some of these years, Notre Dame's 2 or 3 biggest, toughest games are all in a row. Horrible scheduling. You're independent. You shouldn't end up where you're in a stretch of your 2 or 3 heavy hitters all in a row. Spread it out. So I think there's a big balance there. I totally agree with you I think people get over it. the FCS thing. It's just something I liked holding on to with a sense of pride. And you know what makes me really mad about this? This pisses me off, quite frankly. Southern Cal, okay.
I mean, it's been one of those kind of like, it's been like a badge of honor. Notre Dame, we're independent, number one. Number two, we don't play FCS schools. And now that's a peg that's been sawed down to just a spot on the wall, and it's been covered with, drywall.
But not only that,
now gone.
Not only that, but here's what gets me. We were down to a couple years ago. Notre Dame, UCLA, and USC were the only 3 teams that never went down this path. UCLA did it. It was down to Notre Dame and USC. USC scheduled an FCS team. I marked them off the list saying we're the last one standing. They found a Power 5 team, called and canceled that game. So they technically did schedule an FCS, but they never played them. Canceled the game, scheduled a Power 5 team. So now USC is the last one standing. I don't like that either, but I kind of agree with you. When we get off the initial shock of this, people are going to forget about it. Nobody looks twice at the AstroTurf. Nobody looks twice at the Jumbotron now. And I just think people will get over it. For me, it was a hill as an independent guy that I wanted to die on, and now I'm dead.
Yeah, I think that the next big domino is the conference one. Jack is getting older, and you talked about in your last show a new athletic director. The NBC contract is coming around, and there is a financial argument for a conference. I would love for Notre Dame to stay independent by all means, okay? But that feels like it's coming. And, that's a whole other topic that I don't think we want to get into tonight. But there's so much that I could personally talk to about that. And I mentioned on my show, but, this FCS team, FCS, thing. I mean, let's face it, as fans, the super fans who are listening to your show, calling in, the people that are live commenting on YouTube right now, these are the super fans, and we are I'd like to say we have the mood ring of real fans. Like most people right now who, okay, they're Notre Dame fans, they have Notre Dame stuff, or they're even alum. But a majority of fans are not doing stuff like what we're doing right now. Most people are not. And though that's kind of sad, I think we as a group of super fans are unique in that respect. And this bothers us. This concerns us. We talk about it, and we are voicing our opinion. At the end of the day, is the university going to listen to us? Probably not, which is unfortunate. But I'm still not going to be quiet. I'm going to still voice my opinion, and if I don't like it, darn it, they're gonna hear it.
Yeah, here's the thing though. And I said this in the show. I think Jack has about done a lot of the big stuff Jack's going to do. There's no doubt about it, winding down his career. If you get some new hip whippersnapper AD in there that is modern, all he's going to do is look at 2 things. What's the easier path to winning a championship here? Being independent or being in a conference? I think most people would agree it's being in a conference because you don't have to go undefeated to be in the playoff. Then you look at the money, and there's no way around it. Being in a conference TV deal makes everybody more money. If he just looked at those 2 things, you have to weigh those 2 factors. And on the other arm, tradition. Where do you fall? Where does the new guy fall? Like, it's a tough argument for me to make against it other than tradition. And they're going to say tradition doesn't pay the bills.
I'd rather have the tradition. I'd rather have the tradition of Notre Dame winning titles again, right? And if as you say is 100% true, and I actually tend to agree with what you say there. Let's face it, the last independent team to win a title was Miami in 1989. They were the last independent team. Now, that doesn't necessarily, like, past experience doesn't necessarily dictate the future. That's not what I'm saying. But let's face it, the last X years since that, Notre Dame as the main contender, main independent school, in FBS, it hasn't necessarily helped us win a title, that's for sure. So at the end of the day, what's the definition of insanity? Repeating the same thing and expecting different results. Is joining a conference potentially an easier path for Notre Dame to win a title? Right now in 14 playoffs, I don't know. If playoff expansion plus automatic bids of conference winners is, then yes, I think Notre Dame should join a conference under those very specific circumstances of a 18 playoff or something reformatted.
Now, wait a second. Wait. You're bringing up some good stuff because it's totally reasonable, but I think there is a flip side. What if I argue to you, if they expand a playoff to like 12, could you argue it actually does the opposite and frees Notre Dame up to not have the pressure to be perfect as an independent and still make the playoff? Like, do you get what I'm saying? Could it be framed the other way, where if they do expand and there's at-large bids, that it relieves some of the pressure now because we could lose a game and still make it as an at-large pretty much every year with one loss? Does that make sense to you as an angle, or does it depend on what they do with those automatic bids?
Well, and it depends. Like, if a 12-team playoff implies that like the top 4 ranked teams have a bye in the first round, and so would if Notre Dame was an independent as an at-large bid, they would have to be ranked in the top 4. Now, Grant, said format you're speaking of is not in a reality at this point. But I remember reading something at one point where it would only be for a Power 5 or like a conference champion type of school.
Listen, I'm glad,
and that would. But the thing is, like, if we're talking about the easiest path for Notre Dame to win a title, it would be not playing that extra playoff game.
Yeah, here's the other thing. I think it was last summer when the playoff committee met and they talked about that new expansion format. And then there was some agreement made between Jack and all those other power brokers that Notre Dame could be in it. But even if you're undefeated and ranked number 1, the highest you could be is number 5 and no bye in the playoff. That sucks. I'm glad they scrapped that plan and we're back at square zero. And Jack didn't sign us up to be in 5th place if we're undefeated and the best team in the country in perpetuity. I didn't like that.
Right.
You can only lose.
That is definitely a very, very, that I would argue is even more the difficult scenario for Notre Dame.
I mean, you can only lose
12 games.
You can only lose games you have to play. So the fact that you would be undefeated, ranked number 1, and have to play an extra game, you can only lose the games you play, and you can only get hurt in the games you play. Like, I am glad that got scrapped before it became official. And now we can reevaluate, see what's going to happen with these conferences shifting. I saw somebody say the ACC might not even be around in a bunch of years. Everybody wants to move into the SEC because of the TV money deal. I think it's, what is it?
Yep.
$68 million a year each team gets now. When they have the big 2 from the Big 12 joined, you're looking at $100 million a year. You could go 0-12 in that league and you get $100 million for your program. $100 million.
Can't even imagine that amount of money.
Hey,
like,
Notre Dame's getting 15. Notre Dame's sitting at 15 a year.
Their practice facilities, weight rooms, like, good God, what are they doing with this money? Is this, maybe I don't want to know, but it's like, good grief. But no, if you're looking at, Notre Dame joining a conference, and if there's a financial argument, I don't know if that would result in, polos at the bookstore dropping in price, probably not, or even ticket sales dropping, probably not. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, from a financial argument, I'd never really thought of the finances of joining a conference. I was kind of more just like, well, maybe if we join a conference, NBC won't be doing the games anymore, and there's absolutely zero risk of the game having a home game having to be watched on Peacock.
You know what I saw? I saw that the Big Ten was when their TV deal comes up, that NBC is very interested in bidding for some Big Ten games. And the structure that I saw looked like they would build it around Notre Dame. So if Notre Dame had an afternoon game, when Notre Dame ends at 6:37 or whatever after an afternoon game, that would roll into the Big Ten game of the week on NBC. Or you could have an NBC one earlier in the day leading into a Notre Dame night game. But the interesting thing is, it seemed like if they did that, those deals would still be separate. Notre Dame would have theirs, and then the Big Ten would negotiate something with NBC to be able to do this, and it would be on the same channel, but I don't think all in the same pool of money. But it's interesting. But money is money, and I have learned in my life, money gets a lot of things done. So you get some new AD in there. You get some new AD in there who's going $15 million a year for this, and $70 million for a Big Ten TV deal. What are we doing here? I don't know. Is that going to be something talked about when Jack gets ready to retire and they're looking at the next AD to check out their philosophical stances of the potential candidates? I'm just saying, if this was a move with everything getting so modern so fast, it wouldn't surprise me if that came when there's new leadership at the athletic department.
Yeah, it's hard to say with the future on the horizon, and there's so many new moving parts with this football team, with our new head coach and our program and recruiting in probably one of the best places it's been in the last 10 years. I wanted to look on as an analysis before the new season of, I don't want to say bias, but the impact of recruiting and where these teams that have won the national championship over the last, say, 10, 15 years, where was their average, 4-year recruiting in the year that they won, right? So, and what I'm seeing is that their recruiting is better, quote unquote, than Notre Dame's over the last 3 years. I haven't finished this analysis, but I can guarantee you for people who listen to my show, the Fighting Irish Baseball Show, we will do that analysis. And so I see it as, what is the gap that Notre Dame can close? Because let's face it, you have to have good players. You must have good players on your D-line, your O-line, good quarterback, etc. But you also need a good coach. And I do think Marcus is a winner. I think he can take this team to the promised land, but a lot of things have to happen over the next couple of years for someone who, quite frankly, has head coaching experience of currently one game.
You know what helps your learning curve as a new coach? Talent. The more elite talent you have, the quicker that learning curve comes around. And it's amazing how that works out, Bringing up your topic about the talent before you won, the recruiting effort before you won, I believe it's been a while since I did some of that research. I think I looked back at 10 years and the teams that won championships, where their average recruiting classes were, the 3 to 4 cycles leading up to the year they won it. And what I found was overall top 5 talent average leading into the year you won for a few years before. However, there were 2 outliers to that statistical trend, and they were Auburn with Cam Newton and the Clemson team with Trevor Lawrence. So then it makes it crystal clear to me. You got to either have overall top 5 talent for a few years in a row, or you got to have the best quarterback and the best player in the whole league. So to me, correct, it just tells you what it is, man. You could do a lot of nice things with pretty decent talent. I think we are now at the point, especially in the NIL arms race and everything going on, you got to have elite dudes, and you got to have a lot of them.
I agree. A good quarterback makes your team look really good.
Let me wrap up with you with this question. How do you feel about the Dante Moore recruitment? Where do you think it's going? I do see some concern in the chat that NIL will become a bigger factor than we want it to be. Because if it goes that route, it isn't going to favor us. What are your thoughts on that?
the thing I think Notre Dame has going for it, other than it being Notre Dame and it's awesome, but granted I have that bias. But he's from Michigan, so from Michigan to Notre Dame is not that far of a stretch as far as if we want to take a region bias, right? It's not like he's from Florida, right?
The weather's such a big thing. You're not coming from 80 degrees every day
right.
going, what is this Indiana weather?
To, crappy weather.
Yeah,
exactly. So that's something I think that will not be a negative influence upon his decision, and even be really a factor. I think Marcus Freeman's personality is far and above. Like I think if Kelly was still our coach, there's no way we'd have a shot at Dante Moore. Period. But with Freeman, I think that's a game changer because he's younger. He has the ability to connect. He had been in the pros, right? And when I did research and listened to other people talk or just Marcus Freeman talking in interviews. So he went to Ohio State and he played for two teams under Tressel that lost back-to-back BCS championship games. So he's gotten very, very close to the pinnacle of success as a player in college football, but he lost both of those games. And so I think there's a hunger and an urgency behind Marcus Freeman, and that energy will be intoxicating and can be, he can seek out players and people are drawn to that personality. That's my opinion. Specifically to this young recruit, this quarterback, I think the best thing that helps recruiting, I believe, is winning. If a team keeps winning, then a good recruit wants to go to a school that he's probably going to win, right?
Define winning, because we've been doing a lot of winning. So how much winning? Like, does it have to be elite winning? Like, I've been asking this philosophically with Notre Dame. To get the elite of the elite guys, is it chicken or the egg? Do you got to beat a bunch of good teams nobody thinks you're going to beat, then they come? Or do you have to convince them to come, then win it, and then they come because you're winning it? Right?
I think, and I think it's kind of like, if you're in the, ranked number one, you get an easier, round or path to the championship game if this is, college basketball or any like, ranked tournament kind of situation. I think you have to have some success with the guys you have today, and that comes down to your head coach. But going forward, then you get like the real guys, and I don't think Georgia would be where they are today if Kirby Smart, with his previous recruiting when he was first hired, and he had success in the SEC and in bowl games and winning New Year's Sixes and playoff appearances and losing some really close, that really close championship game to Alabama a few years ago. That kind of stuff matters. All right. And so for Notre Dame, we don't have that depth of resume with our winning, but we have a good program. We do have a winning program as far as, the last 5 years, which is fantastic from where it was in 2016. So I'm gonna hang that as a benefit. There's so many factors that go into recruiting, with, how close it is to school or to your hometown, academics, some of these other things. And Notre Dame offers things to these young student athletes that other schools can't do, right? Anything from Alumni Network, this whole 40-year decision, right?
Yep.
But let's face it, they're going there to play football. Let's not kid ourselves here. So I cannot get into the mind of the young recruit, but what I can say with confidence is Notre Dame just needs to keep winning. And if Dante Moore goes somewhere else, we'll shrug our shoulders and sigh, and clearly we'll be disappointed. But I don't think he will make a decision early. At this point, he's either going to make a decision mid to early football season, or it's going to be a national signing day kind of situation.
Maybe that is just the price you pay when you swim in the deep end of the talent pool, is being strung out that long and you don't know, what you're going to end up with. Maybe that's just a part of how this game goes and we're not used to it. I always joke on my show, we're not getting the hat flippers. Like, we're not the hat flip team, that day with them all sitting there. I don't know. I've been told a lot of different things, but every week that goes by and I don't hear something or see something more official, that level of concern is just there. But here's where I'm going to finish this up. Really good discussion, by the way. Thank you for calling.
Hey, happy to call.
I think Marcus Freeman's personality is the X factor that brings all of the things you were talking about together. Blending the football part with the academic part, with the feeling like a family part, with the able to relate to these recruits part, with the making it about Notre Dame and the players and not about him, with the way that he's letting his staff speak openly and freely about different ways to try things and getting their input. I just feel like Marcus Freeman gets it in a way that I haven't felt about Notre Dame coaches really since Lou Foley. So with that, I find a lot of comfort and confidence in a way that I just simply didn't have, just based on the personalities of the last handful of guys that have been the coach. And I think that's fair. People gravitate to the guy. And I just think that matters a lot. Jim Harbaugh's not out personality Marcus Freeman to impress Dante Moore. Not possible that space Martian is going to make him feel more comfortable when they sit down and talk. No, it's impossible. He's a Martian.
It took Harbaugh how many years to finally beat Ohio State, And I mean, there are so many weird, crazy things about Harbaugh, from eating his own boogers to wearing cleats in recruits' houses to just what happened after the playoffs of him almost, being the new head coach of the Vikings, I think, right? Like that was kind of, a soap opera. That reminded me of the whole, is Brett Favre retiring? Nope, he's back kind of situation. Like, okay, it was kind of a little taste of that. You're 100% right. Marcus Freeman can probably connect with these young men in a far more impactful way than Harbaugh could. And some of these other coaches, it's like you just kind of look at them like, okay, that's awkward and weird, and like Kelly's a perfect example of that with his weird spinning room.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why he left Notre Dame. If that's the case, then yay. But you're right. There's so many good things going for Marcus, from an X factor to his ability to motivate players, to connect with them. The only thing he does not have is that big word experience.
Yep.
And those are the things that do matter in big games.
But hey, that
is one thing that Harbaugh does have that Marcus doesn't.
That's true, but Michigan's late to the race in the Dante Moore sweepstakes. And I think a large part of why they're late to the race in terms of building a proper recruiting dynamic relationship with him is, I think Harbaugh figured he wasn't going to be around. So why bother? And then, so now they're trying to catch up, and it's like, hey, you're kind of from here, so we should have the in. And maybe I just hope that's not the case. But Marcus has the personality and the outlook, like a vision for the program, that I think if Notre Dame's ever going to win it in a conference, independent, whatever, if they're ever going to get over the hump, I'm not saying it's going to be Marcus Freeman, but it's going to be this type of vibe, in my opinion. This type of vibe, this type of energy, more young, more modern, more hip. I just think that's exactly what Notre Dame needs. And I love it. I couldn't be happier. It's the most upside I've seen from the program in my life.
Oh yeah, I mean, right after Marcus was hired, my brother and I did a show, the Fighting Irish Faithful show, an episode where we got on the phone. It was recorded, and it was very just like emotional, responsive to this, and it was like yes, this is the right decision. Yes, this is the guy. He's the best fit. And kudos to Jack and the administration for not sitting on it, not waiting around and letting, Marcus get snatched up by like Virginia Tech or Florida or something like that. Because darn well, if Notre Dame had sat on their laurels, there's no way Marcus would still be himself.
I guess he was going to be in line. He was going to be in line for the Duke head job. I thought he was their main guy for that job. If Notre Dame didn't want it, or maybe some other ACC team. So you got to give Swarbrick credit for that. He didn't overthink it. It could be dangerous sometimes to listen to what the players want, but for some reason I felt like this was different. When he listened to them. Great move. I was going to absolutely have a stroke if they let him out of the building. Would have been the biggest mistake ever. I tell people all the time, when he was hired as the defensive coordinator under Kelly, 1 month he was on campus. And I had people that work at Notre Dame texting me, this new guy's out of control with the recruiting. We can't even keep up with the paperwork he has coming in and out of here. And right then, 1 month in, people were saying he's rocking the boat in that recruiting office because they've never seen anything like this amount of work and the way he's doing it. Right then, I was like, this might be the guy, because what we've been doing and used to isn't getting us over the hump. You need that new energy. You need a guy that goes in there and goes, we're changing things. I'm going to do it different. I love all of it. I love all of it.
Yeah, question everything, assume nothing.
I love all of it.
And expect everything.
Yep.
He's doing so much more on the recruiting that Kelly couldn't even dream of or even want to, quite frankly.
Yep.
And and the best part about it is I don't think he's doing anything out of the ordinary beyond just selling Notre Dame in the program, which is what you're supposed to do.
Yep, but he's doing it in a
out there driving up in a Ferrari.
Exactly. But he's
going there and saying, this is the program. This is who we are. You can be impactful. Do you want to step up to the plate?
He's doing that.
Than I am right now.
He's doing everything you said, and he's doing it with a modern, hip, cool twist and energy to it. And it's amazing. It's exactly what I always envisioned. If Notre Dame's ever going to land these elite guys and win anything, what does it have to be? This vibe is it. So now he's got to get the experience, and that's why I'm open to having some struggles next year. I'm not going to like it. I'm not going to love it. I'm not going to say that's good. I'm not going to say it's okay. But if he struggles a little bit, feeling his way out as a first-time head coach, but he recruits this way, in 2 to 3 years, you're going to be glad you got that one learning curve year out of the way.
Absolutely. Well, and you can see it with our defensive recruiting. It's just out there. Now we got to get a quarterback. Now we got to get some receivers. We got to maintain the offense, because let's face it, you need to score points. We must score touchdowns. The most important stat is scoring touchdowns, period. After that, the next most important stat is scoring passing touchdowns specifically. The national champion on average, I believe, ranks 8th in the country over the last 10 years. The last 10 national champions on average rank 8th in passing touchdowns scored.
That's a really good stat. That's a really good stat to bring up. And I mean, if you look at Notre Dame's last couple playoff appearances, they got thrown on all over the yard by those elite wide receivers and then what the quarterbacks did. So you're exactly right. But thanks a lot for calling, my friend. I really appreciate it. Call again and tell the folks where they can find.
I really appreciate you bringing me on. It's been great to
tell everybody what your show is. Tell everybody where they can find it.
Yeah, hello everyone. This is Joe. I run the Fighting Irish Faithful show, the Fighting Irish Faithful podcast on YouTube, Spotify, all your places. And you can find me on Twitter at faithful_Irish, Faithful Irish. Fighting Irish Faithful show. We try to do live shows with Twitter Spaces at times. We've upgraded some equipment, and we're gonna try to do some new things next year. But yeah, we like having fun. The mantra of the show is scotch and spreadsheets. So we like to have some fun, and who knows what happens after dark. But we try to be very stat and evidence based. Who's holding the trophy? Not Notre Dame. How do we get there? Come to my show. We'll talk all about it.
Beautiful. Well, thanks a lot for the call. I really appreciate it. Give me a call again next time.
All right. Thanks, John.
Have a good one.
Cheers. Go Irish.
Go Irish indeed. We need to get back. That was a pretty good call. We need to get back. Something came up in the chat that I need to address. Let's see. What was it? Somebody asked, do you think, where is it? Do you think Marcus Freeman will be able to recruit and land 5 stars? That's the entire reason I think he got this job is the belief that he's going to be able to land 5 stars. Like, to me, that shouldn't even be a question. That's the reason that he's here, I thought. So I forget where it was. I have to go back, and somebody asked, do you think he'll be able to pull it off? He better. That is with no head coaching experience, that theoretical ability to recruit those guys as the head guy is kind of why we're where we're at. So I fully expect him to be able to recruit some 5-star guys. That's the idea. And if you land one that's a quarterback, you're going to be in really good shape really, really fast. But that's the idea. He's going to thread that needle, not be writing fat checks, still maintain the Notre Dame values, and be able to find these guys that want to go to Notre Dame. Thread that needle. We're going to take a 715. 715, you're on the air.
Donald Riker.
What's up, buddy? What's going on in Wisconsin?
Let me see here. Weather is starting to get better. I have a half-acre land at my house. I spent, 24 hours raking it. I'm still roughly 40% done.
Not bad, my friend. So what do you think, Riker? Notre Dame going to get Dante Moore? What do you think about that? How big of a deal is it? Am I overdoing it? Am I being over dramatic?
Well, I've been thinking about Dante Moore. And if we land him, with the golden chair, could we say he's the Fresh Prince of Notre Dame?
I like that angle, although I'm afraid he might get up and slap somebody if I call him the Fresh Prince. It's kind of dangerous these days.
Yeah, but
so what do you think? Do you think we're going to pull this off and Marcus is going to land him or no?
Well, it's a big risk because the domino is going to fall with these elite quarterbacks. If you keep waiting and waiting and waiting, well, how many more are going to be left? Pretty soon you're going into plan C and D for the quarterbacks. With these wide receivers, they want to know who is throwing the ball. If you have more, that will start the domino effect of how many receivers and running backs want to play with more. If you strike out, how many of those receivers are going to say, I'm going somewhere else?
Yeah, it's a tricky equation. And what I struggle with when I think about all this philosophically, one thing I struggle with is a lot of these are new age problems for Notre Dame. To be worrying about even being in the mix for a top quarterback like this, and the time that it takes and the dominoes that fall before and after it and all that, it's a little bit of a unique circumstance I'm happy to be in, and make no doubt about it. Whether Dante Moore commits in a couple weeks at the blue and gold game. Damn it. I love Freeman. I know I want to be here. Boom. Whether it's that or it rolls months all the way into the summer. We're in the dog days of August or whatever. Whenever it is, I'm going to be happy. The sooner it is, the lower my stress level will be, and the higher I think the probability is that this class can attract other elite guys. So I'm not going to complain if we get them whenever we get them, but the sooner the better for my stress level and to build that class, just like you're talking about. What do you think the record's going to be this year? What would you predict?
I mean, since this is Marcus Freeman's first year as a head coach, with the talent we have, 93, 10, and 2, I'll say with good health. Because we don't know how Marcus Freeman is going to react in close games. How many of those games we have the better talent, but we still lose? How many of those games under the bright lights will fall through? Because I will say this, if Brian Kelly was here, I would say 8-4 because I don't even trust him, and he is proven to lose teams that no business losing to. South Florida, Michigan 19, you can say it was the rain. You can say it was the rain, but guess what? You didn't prepare the team correctly. Let me see here. Northwestern at 14. Brian Kelly can say, oh, Cam McDaniel throwing the ball. Well, guess what? You're the reason why we lost.
Man, I'm telling you, you're remembering, you have a good memory for all of the worst moments. Thanks for making me relive that. That's brutal. So I agree with you. What do you think is going to happen against Ohio State week 1? You think they just blow us away throwing deep bombs all day, or do you think we can hang in there tough and it's going to be a close ball game? How do you see that?
Oh, boy. I mean, it depends what Ohio State has. Because, let me see here. I
know they got a lot of talent.
It's going to be a rough game. Because Ohio State has proven itself. Ryan Day has proven himself. What do we have proven in these games? Like, seriously, how many times we play in these games with the big lights, something to prove to everyone that's against us? Look what happened. We lose. The people against us are right. How many times would the kids seen that? Well, guess what? Until we do something against somebody that everyone in America say, we don't have a chance against Ohio State until we prove it. How are you supposed to believe in Notre Dame? Guess what? I don't want a Freeman here. I believe in Freeman. So
see, that's the philosophical question I have is, and what this all comes down to for next year is, how long does it take for Marcus Freeman to get that learning curve of being a head coach out of the way? How long does that take? You are right. There are going to be in-game decisions that have to be made fast. How's Marcus going to handle that? I don't know. But if I have to give him a year to figure that out and a couple dumb things happen, but he's recruiting elitely the whole time, I'll deal with it. Because under that scenario, the high end, when he does figure it all out, is going to be a way higher level than where Kelly was willing or able to go. So if I got to deal with the rough patch for him to figure out how to be a head coach, but he's recruiting top 5 classes, sign me up for the learning curve. I'll wait. Do you agree with that philosophy?
I agree with you because we wanted him, but at the same time, we know there could be some rough patches. We either going to say, we believe in you, we're going to die in a hill with you. If to get it in the darkness, to get in the light.
Yeah,
we're with them, and we support them, guess what? We're going to be there with a title in a trophy case that isn't a tent.
Yeah, me and that Camping World Bowl, I'll never get over that. But the other thing you bring up is a legitimately fair point in this philosophical way. Marcus Freeman's genuine personality makes me want to give him a little bigger leash than I could give Brian Kelly, just because personally Brian Kelly rubbed me the wrong way. Marcus Freeman doesn't. So I'm not saying that makes it okay to lose. I am just saying if he needs a little bit of a leash to be able to get his sea legs under him to be a head coach, I'm willing to go along for that ride as long as you're recruiting elitely. I'm not going along for that ride and you're recruiting average or you're the 25th best team. That ain't going to cut it for where this program's at. But if you need a year or two to figure out how to be the head guy while you're accumulating top 5 talent, that's how this baby grows and turns into a monster. So I am a guy known for having no patience ever when it comes to this program. And I'm telling you, I'll have a little bit of patience for this guy because I think he's worth it. And I think his personality's dynamic. I think Notre Dame's never seen anything like this. And I think a lot of people are going to get pissed off when they see the way this staff recruits. It isn't just this cycle. Give it 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Let this all turn over to where it's all Marcus's guys. And then you might see what an RKG is really supposed to be.
Well, yeah, because look at the last coach who won us the championship. Lou Holtz wasn't Lou Holtz when he first got here. Lou Holtz took 3 years to get Notre Dame where he needs to be. Guess what? It made recruiting better. It felt Notre Dame better.
And you know what else, too? Here's the other dynamic. Here's the thing that I pull from Lou Holtz to Marcus Freeman all the time. It's where my mind and my heart immediately goes to. These two guys seem to have a very, very keen, natural, instinctual understanding about the spirit of Notre Dame and what that means to the people who it means something to. And I don't think that's something you can learn or gradually move into. Lou and Marcus seem to both kind of just have that understanding inside them that all Notre Dame people do, that spirit of Notre Dame that's true and real. You can't fake it. And these guys seem to have it. And what that translates to is we're going to do all this and we're going to win all this, not for me, not for you, but for Notre Dame. It's about Notre Dame. It's about that mission overall. It isn't about the coach and his ego this time. It's about those guys, those players, the university. Motivation. That's a big thing Brian Kelly could never figure out. He tried being the mean guy. He tried being the nice guy. He tried the 1 year where he was BK homeboy, throwing up deuces. He tried it all, and he could never press the right buttons to have those teams playing the best in the biggest moments, in the biggest game regularly. He never figured it out. I don't think Marcus is going to have that problem. He might have some practical issues, when to call timeout, when to do this, decision-making on that, whatever. He'll learn those things. Those things are all learnable with experience. You can't teach how to be a natural motivator, how to be a natural rallier, how to know to make it not about you and about a mission bigger than all of us. Guys like Lou and Marcus just have that. That is the it factor I've been begging for it. So we're going to see how it pays off. I think it's going to. I'm not saying it's going to be right away. If it is, I'll love it, but I don't know if it is going to be.
Yeah, because Brian Kelly never embraced Notre Dame. He never cared about Notre Dame. It was just another step for Brian Kelly. Come on, how many times Brian Kelly tried to leave for the NFL, Southern Cal, Philadelphia, or whatever? How many times he tried to get his way?
Yeah, it's
Lou and Marcus Freeman cared about Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman has proven he cares about Notre Dame. He embraces Notre Dame. Going to the kids' locker room telling them, yeah, we have higher restrictions. But guess what? How many of those schools make you work harder compared to us?
Yeah, and the other thing is, it's funny, Brian Kelly talking to, his interview talking about how it's harder at Notre Dame and, it's hard to recruit and all that. He's sitting there complaining about all of it down with his Mardi Gras beads on. Meanwhile, Marcus Freeman has the #1 class looking to land 5-star guys that Kelly wouldn't even pick up the phone to talk to. So I don't want to hear it from him. In a way, Riker, this all worked out. Think about where we're at in this exact moment. Everybody's pretty much happy right now. Brian Kelly wasn't happy at Notre Dame. He's out. He's got a fat paycheck, and he seems to be really happy. I got what I wanted, which is Marcus Freeman as the head coach. I'm happy. I think most of the Notre Dame fans are open to this. So right now, it kind of seems like everybody's won, and we just have to see what's going to happen on the field, and then I think we'll have to recalibrate this discussion. So I don't know. How do you think Brian Kelly's going to do at LSU? Let me ask you that.
Well, here's my question to you. Who will pay more? Dr. Dre paying his last gold digger or LSU paying Brian Kelly when he gets fired?
I'm telling you, LSU's got high standards. You want to talk about how hard it is to win at Notre Dame and, what's the line? The head coach at Notre Dame said, whether it's Notre Dame fans or Notre Dame haters, they're both a pain in the ass, something to that effect. Whether you love us or hate us, you're a pain in the ass. You think expectations are high at Notre Dame? They're high at LSU. They're not going to tolerate anything but winning that conference and making the playoff. I don't know how much patience they have for him, but he got a big deal. Isn't it a 9 or a 10-year deal? He's going to be there a while, theoretically.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. What I was going to say. Oh, yeah. When Brian Kelly's contract's like 10 years, $95 million, well, how much that's going to be a buyout when everyone figures out who Brian Kelly is? Yeah, the favorite. 2 people in the Notre Dame media will criticize Brian Kelly when it's reasonable, but there's like 100 of them down at LSU. I'll give you like 2 years.
Well, we're going to see. I think the grace period there isn't going to be long because it's LSU and they expect to compete for championships. And it's similar to Notre Dame in that way, but it's a tough path. Look at it this way. When you're at Notre Dame with some of the schedules Brian Kelly had, especially in our playoff years, not intentionally weak schedules, but oftentimes we had brand names on that schedule that were a little down that we were able to take advantage of. You ain't going to have that at LSU. Like, it's not, you're just not. There's too much talent all concentrated in the same area, and you're going to run into it. So it's going to be interesting to see. And I'm genuinely curious to watch it. The same way I hate watch every Michigan game and never miss one, I got to start watching LSU too, just to look at Kelly and see what it's going to be like. It's a very interesting social experiment. That culture clash between this polished Boston politician, Brian Kelly, and the culture down there, it's either going to be exactly what both parties needed to win, or it's going to be an absolute shit show that I will enjoy the hell out of. I don't think there's going to be much in between, because if they even lose 4 games a year, like that's he's gone. He's gone. So it's going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, because if LSU is going to lose a game, I'm going to turn it into the press conference if I can see yet. I want to see who Brian Kelly blames other than himself. Because let me see here, how many times do you blame the players for losing a game? Oh, let me see here. You tell like Sam Messelberg to snap the ball a shotgun 40 times, and you tell DeShone Kizer to throw a ball in an actual hurricane 50 times.
Yep, you're right. Well, Riker, thanks for giving me a call, man. I'll let you know next time we're going to do a show. I appreciate it. And you stay cool up there in Wisconsin.
Yeah. See you, man.
Take care, brother. So I'm going back to the chat here, and I see a lot of talk about the focus on Dante Moore, and is that the right strategy with all this? Again, from my understanding with this, I thought it was Moore and Vizina were both in the mix here. And again, this is just my understanding from what I read and the people I talk to, what I've heard. You guys, it might be different. Something to the effect of, if Notre Dame wanted Vizina and he was number one, he already would have committed to Notre Dame. But Notre Dame's been holding off on that because they've been led on by Moore that might come to fruition, and he's their number one pick. And so that's kind of the dynamic that I understand it to be. It's kind of like dating in a way where it's like, you have this one you're really interested in, but that one's okay. And she's not, you don't not like her, but it isn't that one. And then you might end up with nothing if you don't play your cards right. No date to the dance. No date. So this is high risk poker, you guys. And I admit that. This is what happens when you swim in the deep end of the talent pool. You run into some of these situations, there's risk involved, but if it pays off, it's going to pay off big. If it doesn't pay off with this kid, I'm not going to say it was lack of effort, lack of trying, lack of communication, lack of creative recruiting angles. It isn't going to be any of that stuff I could blame the last guy for. It's just going to be he wanted to go somewhere else. Well, guess what? Emotionally and intellectually, I can handle that. Just knowing a guy would prefer to go to Ohio State or Michigan or whatever, instead of losing out on a recruit. And I got to sit there and go, I wonder if the head coach even called the guy. I wonder if the head coach even texted him. I wonder when he came to campus with his family, how many hours Brian Kelly spent with that guy. I don't have those questions now. So it's a lot more cut and dried with what's going on now because I don't have those concerns on the back end from an administrative standpoint that I had all these other years. We would not get these guys, and I had to think, are we doing all we could do? And the answer was always no. The answer was no under Kelly. No, we weren't doing all we could do. He didn't have the time of day it took to build proper relationships with these kids and families. And I'll never get over that. That's not okay. That's effort. That's not Notre Dame clamping down on you. That's not, we couldn't get it done because of Notre Dame. That's your ego. That is you. And he never wanted to change it. So, you know what I've decided? This all worked out for the best. The timing, this all worked out for the best. You wait. If Kelly stays another year, Marcus is here another year, Kelly stays, Freeman was going to get another head job and be gone. So, in a way, the further we get down this path, I'm actually thanking Brian Kelly for this. I'm not mad at him. I love this. This ended up being the best case scenario because I was deathly afraid Kelly was going to stay here longer. 10-2, 11-1, 12-0, but killed in the playoff again. We were going to keep doing that. Somebody was going to hire Freeman away. Then Kelly would have retired, Freeman somewhere else, and then we're up a river again. So in a way, I almost think this all worked out for the absolute best. Kelly's happy. I'm happy as can be with where we're at. So for me, I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. Oh, let's see. More may not come if Notre Dame recruits other QBs. That's the point. I think this is tricky because I think you had Vizina, who is really interested in committing to Notre Dame. And I feel like the message I'm getting is that Notre Dame kind of slow played that because everybody knows Dante Moore was number one. Vizina knows that Dante Moore is number one for Notre Dame too. So when we talk about the timing of all this, it all pieces together. And it isn't fair to keep Vizina lying on a hook where he doesn't know what the dynamic is with Notre Dame either. So how long can you reasonably expect Vizina to hang out there knowing he's your second date to prom and not first before he makes a move? And I think that's the dynamic that we're in. But when I see that Vizina's committing tomorrow and I know it ain't looking like it's not a Notre Dame deal, you have indeed boxed yourself in a little bit in the Dante Moore sweepstakes. I have to believe Marcus Freeman's been around this long enough that he knows what he's picking up from Moore enough to be comfortable to go down this path. It is dangerous. It is risky. This is high stakes poker, though. We're swimming in the deep end of the talent pool now. This isn't a 3-star guy somewhere and they commit to Notre Dame because they're just glad to get that offer. You better commit before somebody else takes that spot. This ain't that. This isn't that. It is a totally different ball game. Okay. Oh, all right, guys. We have gone almost 2 hours. That is going to be it for the show. I have some life responsibilities to take care of yet this evening. I thank all of you for being here. All of your messages. There's a lot. You guys are funny, a lot of these chats. So I thank everybody for being here. Anybody I didn't get to on the calls, call back next time. I got to get into a routine of doing these once a week. Like, I think that's got to be the deal. Pick different topics. But I really think it needs to become more regular, probably once a week. So everybody take care. Thank you so much for being here, for calling. If you called, putting something in the chat. I really appreciate all of you. JD, I appreciate you. Everybody, Chief, Sid Irish, everybody in here. Everybody take care. Have a good evening. And I hope to be seeing a lot of you at the Blue and Gold game in a couple weeks. Have a good night.